Lesson 8, Aristotle on friendship and the good life. So I want to focus mostly on friendship. So the first thing is I want you guys to talk about a little bit about friendship. What do you think a good friend is? What are some of the qualities that you guys would see in a good friend? So shared interests. So you have it in common with certain other people that you dislike. You both found a similar person obnoxious. Loyalty and trust obviously are related. If someone is loyal to you, you will probably trust them more than if they're disloyal to you. And I think Aristotle actually talks about that. He says, when good people are friends with each other, they know that they won't gossip about each other and talk behind each other's back and undermine each other. And he says that's a very important part of friendship. If the friend is drunk and says, "Where's my car keys? Where's my car keys? I'm driving home." Is it okay to lie to the friend and say, I don't know where your car keys are. I think the dog took them out in the backyard. Would that be a moral thing to do? Yeah. Exactly. Or the friend is feeling bad and suicidal. Where's my sword? Where's my sword? I'm going to stab myself in the stomach. Can you lie and say, oh, I threw your sword away. Sorry. And in that case, the true friend is the one who lies to you because they are thinking about your self-interest more than just obeying some rule. Let's talk about Aristotle's view of friendship. One of the interesting things that occurred to me is, first of all, a philosopher is discussing friendship. As far as I know, he's the first philosopher to discuss friendship as a philosophical issue, as a moral issue, as part of being excellent and part of the good life. And he kind of has a monopoly on this, the discussion of friendship in terms of what it is. And so let's talk about this. First of all, he says friendship, when it says friendship as the basis of political unity, I thought it was interesting that he looks at friendship as something that holds together like a whole society, right? And we've been looking at this question in a number of texts so far about political unity. How do you keep, especially in a democracy or free society, and the Greeks were relatively free and relatively democratic, certainly. And the problem then is you get faction, which we were talking about Hamilton and the founders of the United States. It's a problem they were very concerned with too. And Aristotle's solution is fascinating to me because he says friendship seems to hold states together, and lawgivers or politicians care more for it than for justice. For political unity seems a kind of friendship. Statesmen aim at this unity most of all and expel faction as their worst enemy. So a society of friends, of people you can disagree with but still say these are my countrymen and so on and so forth, that's very valuable to keeping a society stable and unified. Now, what do we have today in the United States, like since the election of Trump and all this kind of stuff? Does it strike you that we have a lot of faction and that there's a lot of friendship going on, or maybe not as much? So people are so upset that they're getting violent when they don't get the outcome they want. And then all people were getting canceled for supporting Trump. And people were taking this super personally, like a religious issue, which candidate you supported. And they talked about the country being very divided, right? Because people are saying, if you voted for Trump, I'm not going to date you. If you voted for Trump, I'm not going to work with you. I'm not going to hang out with you. I'm not going to say hello to you. Or other people who voted for Trump might say the same thing about Biden. Anyone who supported Biden, I can't sit next to them at a dinner party, right? So are the enemies of the United States, like Russia and China, look at this and go, yeah, they hate each other. The United States is breaking apart. It's breaking into faction because the people aren't friends, right? So I think Aristotle would look at that and say, we need to find a way to kind of be friends even when we disagree. And people are taking this stuff way too personally and saying, if you disagree with me politically, you're a bad person. Let's talk about the reasons Aristotle thinks that friends are necessary. I'm going to read the first paragraph. Friendship seems necessary for life. For if we had all other goods, without friends, no one would choose to live. No one would choose the whole world if this required living alone, since man is a political animal who naturally lives with others. Okay, so that idea that man is a political animal who naturally lives with others and is made to live with others is one of the most famous sentences in Aristotle, and one of the most famous, probably the most famous sentence in all political science. So if you go to college and you study political science, which is the study of politics, that's the beginning and ending point of political science. And that with that sentence, Aristotle is considered to have founded the whole field of political science by saying man is a political animal who naturally lives with others. And people have pretty much said, yes, that's true. Let's go now to friendships of utility and pleasure. Can anyone tell me what the difference is between these two kinds of friendships? The useful friend and the pleasant friend. Okay, everyone's hand went up at once. So you love them not because of who they are, but because of what they can do for you and what you can get for them, right? Maybe Aristotle would say that makes them more of an acquaintance. But, you might say, yeah, I'm friends with so-and-so. We're on the same soccer team, or, we work together, right? So you have to be pleasant with people you work with. So you might go out for drinks afterwards, and they might be able to help you on projects. And it just helps to have people around the office that you're friendly with, right? Tell me about friendships of pleasure. He says here, we love witty people not for their moral character, but because we find them pleasant and they make you laugh. Now, you might say that it's easy to be friends with that person, but if you only love them because they make you laugh and you find them pleasant and you get kind of like a high from being around them, do you really love them for who they are, or do you really love them for the feeling that they are kind of giving you when you're around them? You're loving it for something you're getting from them. We love this person not for his nature, but for our own pleasure. And what does he say about these kinds of friendships? Do they tend to last, or do they dissolve easily? If the other person no longer seems pleasant or useful, we cease to love him. And he says also the useful too does not stay permanent, but always changes. Thus, when the motive of the friendship dissolves, the friendship dissolves too. And then he goes into saying friendships of old and young people. And he says old people tend to have friendships that are people who are useful to them. Young people, however, he says, definitely tend to base their friendships on pleasure. So teenagers, for instance, like that, it's all about, how that person, makes you feel in the moment. He says, for the young live by emotion and pursue above all what pleases them in the present moment. So he's saying young people, you might be friends with them in the morning, and by the nighttime, they might be your enemy, right? So he's talking about middle school, basically. And I can remember in middle school being totally confused, like, are we friends or are we not friends? Like, this morning you said, hey, da-da-da. Now in the afternoon, you're ignoring me, right? And after a while, you just kind of have to learn not to take it personally, because, what's going on in the heads of middle schoolers, it's all just the pleasure of the moment or the feeling of the moment. And it's not personal. They might just be drawn like filings to a magnet, or they're blowing like a weather vane where the wind is blowing them. And that's just where people are right there. You start getting into high school, things start stabilizing, right? But, and that's because it's called maturity. But young people, they say, are very flighty. And so I don't know if any of you have ever had that experience in middle school, but I certainly did. Let's talk about perfect friendship. He says, as the excellent man treats himself, so he treats his friend also, for his friend seems another self. So your friends in your readers forum definitely seem like second selves to you in a lot of ways, right? You guys are talking in code, and that could be definitely a feature of friendship, to have your own kind of private language. If I may go on, he says, now we call most truly friends those who wish their friends well for their friend's own sake. But they love the friend for his own nature and not for some accidental relation to him, such as pleasure or use. So it's not like pleasure or use have nothing to do with it, but that's not the reason you're friends with them. You love them for who they are in their character, because they're good. And it also helps if they're not annoying, right? And it also helps if they are useful to you and help you out. But you're fundamentally not in it to get something from them. You're in it because you appreciate them because they're good. So you admire them. You have this quality of admiration for true friendship. Aristotle believes that's the best basis for, let's say, a romantic relationship, which is going to last for a long time. So if we go down to the next section, why some friendships end and others endure, he says, when you base a relationship on looks, like a romantic relationship, he says, when the bloom of youth passes, the romance often passes too. But Many lovers remain loyal to each other if familiarity has led them to love each other's characters. Now, I think it's in Fiddler on the Roof, where the Jewish mother in the old country is encouraging one of the daughters to get married. And she says, I don't love this guy. And the mother says, you will learn to love him. You will live with him. And over the years, as I learn to love my husband, you will learn to love your husband, right? Now, that's a little opposite than what we would think of today. But in a lot of traditional societies, and in fact, in most of Western culture, up until maybe a couple hundred years ago, people tended to marry more for use than for love. And then they sort of loved each other over time. And he's saying that if you stay loyal and familiar with someone, and you're both good, you will come to love each other's characters. And he says that's a good way of making a union that lasts. A couple other things. And then he goes on and he talks about conditions of friendship. Friends spend time together. Okay. And this is an interesting thing too. You may have noticed that you have a friendship and it declines over time when you're not spending time with people. And if you're good friends, it doesn't break off your friendship to be separated. But if the absence persists, it seems to make people forget their friendship. And there's a saying, out of sight, out of mind. Because friends spend time together, and he says nothing more characterizes friends than spending time together. And then he says this interesting thing. People cannot spend time together if they find each other unpleasant. No one can spend his days with one whose company causes pain, not pleasure. Nature seems above all to avoid the painful and to aim at the pleasant. Though they can briefly endure painful people, no one can put up with pain continuously, not even with the good itself, if it seems painful. So there might be someone who you think is a good person, but they're annoying. And you might say, this person's actually a good person, but she's just annoying because for whatever reason, she seems full of herself, she talks about herself, or she's loud, or, I had a friend who would just, he'd get up every morning and he would just scratch himself for 10 minutes. And his girlfriend was like, why are you scratching yourself every morning for 10 minutes? He was like scratching his belly and going like this. And she's like, why? Just stop scratching yourself, right? So he had to learn how to stop scratching himself so that his girlfriend didn't leave him. So we all have like weird, annoying things that nobody else understands except maybe our parents. And then when we start forming friendships in the world, we kind of learn sometimes we have to dial that behavior back, or else people will label us annoying and kind of say it's painful to be around you. And sometimes we use a phrase in our family that we're humiliated, or we say we're crumiliated or crumel, which means that we want to crumble into a hole because of the way someone is behaving. You definitely need to be not annoying as well as being good, right? So if you want to have more friends, it's good to be a good person, and B, take feedback from people. If like your sister says this is annoying, or your mom says stop that, or your dad says don't do this or whatever, I think, okay, are they onto something? Are they trying to help me? Let's talk about friends in good times and bad. Because I thought something reminded me of that about Socrates, when he was saying everyone avoids causing pain to his friends. And he said, you kind of want to be careful about sharing some of your pain with your friends. And why did he say that? Socrates was pained by the idea that his friends might be in pain. And so he's like, guys, don't cry around me. Come on, keep it together. What are you, women or whatever? So this idea that somehow it's effeminate to show feeling, or you're so wrapped up in your own feelings that you don't care how your other feelings are making other people feel. Aristotle and Socrates think that's not the most excellent. Like, your feelings aren't the most important thing in the world. They might feel like they are to you at the time, but as you guys could tell me, when I get angry, I'm sure you want to tell me your feelings are not the most important thing in the world. There are other people, and you're making us all uncomfortable. You're putting us in pain. It's frightening, right? So that's a perfect example. And I think that applies to all of us. And, it's a lifelong struggle we all wage to not let our emotions get the best of us. So when he says your own best friend, no one would choose to own and rule the whole world if he first had to become someone else, but only would do it if he could remain himself. That's totally blew me away. I'm like, really? So if I could be Alexander the Great, but I wouldn't do it, and I could control the whole world, but I had to be, I'm like, I might do that deal. If I could rule the whole world and be, what's the problem? I think that'd be cool. But, So I don't agree with everything in Aristotle, but anyway, such a person wishes to live with himself. He's talking about the good person here. So if you're talking about a good person, a truly, truly good person, he's saying it's cool. That person's cool spending time with themselves. He's not saying that person would never get lonely. He says that person should have friends. But basically, the good person can be friends with himself. And he can sit there in a room thinking about all the cool stuff he did and go, yeah, that's kind of cool. And he can think about what the future holds to him and go, yeah, the future seems pretty good for me because, I've made some good decisions. And he can kind of enjoy the moment because the thought of him and his actions fill him with pleasure. And it actually kind of reminds me of what it says in the Hebrew Bible. All right, God rested on the seventh day. The first day he created this, the second day, third day, fourth day, he created plants, animals, man. On the seventh day, God looked at it and he saw that it was good. And God's like, hey, man, this is pretty cool, right? So Aristotle has this thing that the excellent person becomes godlike in a way, self-sufficient, loves to contemplate himself in his own creations. Then now let's finish off this section on friendship with what the bad man has to deal with, right? If you're Hitler or Putin, or if you're some, bad person in school, goes around bullying people and vandalizing, or if you're a criminal, no bad man can befriend himself. Those who have done terrible deeds make themselves hated. They shrink from life and destroy themselves. But along the way, they seek others. For when alone, they remember their vicious deeds and anticipate doing even more vicious deeds. But while with others, they forget. Having nothing lovable in them, they cannot love themselves. Therefore, they do not rejoice in themselves. This is one of the reasons not to be that or do that. This is one of the reasons to not hurt others, because this is the big way you hurt yourself, okay, by being bad. That word faction has come up, and again, it has previously in this reading, right? Where did it come up in this reading before, the word faction? I mean, he's talking about the society. So he says, if you don't have friendship, faction will tear apart the society. And here he's saying, if you don't have integrity, if you're not good, faction will tear apart your soul. In both cases, faction is bad, right? So interestingly, if you can't be friends with yourself, then your soul is in factions. If people in a society can't be friends with each other, the society is in factions. Both cases bad, right? Both cases friendship is the solution. Bad people sink under the weight of regret. Therefore, the bad man does not seem well disposed even to himself, because again, he finds little in himself to love. Thus, we should strain every nerve to avoid wickedness and should strive to remain good. For only the good person can befriend himself or another. So again, sometimes people would say, like Socrates had this saying, the person who does wrong is worse off than the person to whom it's done. And some people might say, what are you saying? Like the person who gets murdered is better off than the murderer? And Socrates would say, from a moral perspective, yes, because the person who gets murdered is more excellent. And the person who's the murderer is the least excellent thing it's possible to be, and has to know that they can never love themselves, ever. They could never be happy. They'll always feel guilty, because think about it. When they sit down, what do they think about? How they took life away from someone else. And so that's, you could never be friends with yourself, and any kind of person you're friends with, you're only trying to live in the land of the lotus eaters and forget what you did. The last point I want to make tonight, well, there's maybe 2 points, okay? Did you guys remember reading about the great-souled man? He talks about, it's his portrait, he has like a deep voice and he moves kind of slowly. And this will remind you of maybe of Socrates too. But he says, the great-souled man does not aim at the things commonly held in honor or the things in which others excel. And then you go down, and there's 3 paragraphs in a row where he talks about the great-souled man. The great-souled man loves and hates openly, for it shows cowardice to conceal one's feelings, to care less for truth and for what people think. He must speak and act openly too. He speaks freely because he does not care what others think. And he tells the truth except when he speaks ironically to his inferiors. So he might crack a joke at someone's expense, sort of like Jim on The Office might crack a joke or speak ironically toward Dwight, and Dwight might not get it, and Dwight might think he's being complimented, but Jim's actually speaking ironically to him, right? He says he despises justly because he thinks truly, but the multitude of mediocrities do so at random. So they just judge randomly, right? So he doesn't speak about himself or others because he doesn't care to blame others, since he does not care whether others praise him. Last sentence of that section: the great old man cannot make his life revolve around another except friend, for servitude and flattery inhibit self-respect, right? Totally indifferent to what other people think of him, totally into his own work, and very kind of not caring what other people think. Last point I want to make tonight is selfishness and self-love. We hear a lot of people condemning selfishness. Oh, don't be selfish. You're being so selfish. Da, 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 da. I'm going to read the key ideas here, because this is really interesting and unique in the history of philosophy. Basically, only Ayn Rand and Aristotle have this view, except for maybe Spinoza and a couple other people. A man naturally remains his own best friend and therefore ought to love himself best. The problem or the debate arises because people use the phrase lover of self to mean different things. Those who use the term reproachfully ascribe self-love to people who wickedly seek the greater share of wealth, honors, or pleasures. Those who grasp for those things gratify their animal appetites, and most would do so without restraint if they had the ring of Gyges. Right? See how it all fits together here? We may justly reproach those who love themselves in this way. Therefore, the word selfishness takes its popular meaning from that bad selfishness, okay? But selfishness can also mean something good. True, if a man seems anxious to act justly, temperately, or excellently, and always seeks the honorable course, no one calls him selfish. But in fact, such a man would really seem more than the bad man a lover of self, for he assigns to himself the best and noblest things. And then one final point here, he says, if we all strive toward the noble and strain every nerve to do the noblest deeds, everything will work toward the common good. Therefore, the good man should love himself, for by doing noble acts, he will profit both himself and others. So basically, Aristotle is saying, if everyone was just good, then everyone could be selfish and love themselves, and society would benefit. And let's think of a case like that. I would think of one person that I think has benefited society more than any person I would know of over the last 20 years. And I'll give you a clue. He went to Princeton. And I'll give you another clue. If you order a book and it comes in one day, it's because of this guy. Jeff Bezos, through his selfishness, through his trying to corner the market and trying to make like a super good service that puts all his competitors out of business, I think he's made the world a totally better place. I can't tell you how much better my life is because of Amazon and Jeff Bezos and his selfishly seeking the profit motive and all that kind of stuff. I just think it's amazing. And that's why capitalism as a social system creates all kinds of good by people pursuing their own individual interests. So there's one more passage that's really, really important. It's where he says that we shouldn't, just because we're mortals, we shouldn't only think of mortal things. In the Renaissance, they thought man was like the most excellent thing. And so this idea of man worship, and Aristotle really nails this. He says, look, just because you're human doesn't mean you can't strive to be godlike and try to make yourself immortal through excellence. And that passage really struck me so much that I actually even thought of making it a quote at the beginning of this book, because it's something that I hope that in studying the great books, you all will do and kind of make yourselves more godlike by thinking about all this stuff. It may sound fancy, but it's what Aristotle and Plato and Socrates thought was making ourselves the most godlike, and with what most like super smart people in Western civilization have thought. It's a way of raising yourself up and being called to higher and better things.